Let's talk about Kyrie Irving and the Boston Celtics. What are your thoughts on that right now? I mean,
Well, my first thought overall, and really need to clarify if anybody's watching the show and you aren't familiar with the Sim Hangout, we've talked about a Kyrie before. And when Kyrie was considered top tier, being compared to Steph and Westbrook, I was always slow down. I don't think he's that. I don't think he's an MVP level player. I think he's the next notch down, which is not a bad thing. He's awesome. 26 points per game, super clutch, one of the best closers in the game, all that. But he can be absolutely horrible on defense. He's pouty. He's moody. He's not particularly athletic. He's a little injury prone. So I say that all to say I'm not a Kyrie Irving fan, stan, or defender. But in this particular case, I don't think Kyrie Irving is to blame for the Celtics' year. In this series, he was horrible. And if he played like he did in this series throughout the year, then I would put that on him. But he was the Boston Celtics' best player by a wide margin for most of the year. And we've talked a lot on this show. And the Celtics themselves, especially the veterans, have talked a lot about how it was the younger guys not playing to their level when they played with Kyrie Irving. People pouting about also Gordon Hayward getting playing time and not getting what they thought they'd earned from last year. And at different points of the year, Tatum looked like Jason Tatum of last year. Jaylen Brown looked like Jaylen Brown. Terry Rozier occasionally show up only when Kyrie Irving is sitting for the most part. Did he really look like the best of himself? He rarely played that well with Kyrie on the floor. I think that's a Brett Brown issue. And specifically, I think that the Kyrie Irving Al Horford pick and roll should have been something to be feared at all times throughout the year. But Brett Brown has his vision for how the team's supposed to go, and he did the classic I'm going to make my players adapt to me instead of adapting to my personnel.
so who you're talking Brad Stevens, right?
Brad Stevens, I'm sorry, I said Brett
Okay.
Brown from the Sixers. Brad Stevens. Brad Stevens wants his players to adjust to his system. He doesn't want to adapt his system to the personnel that he has. And as a result, he had two teams, the Kyrie Irving team, which was pretty good, and the not Kyrie Irving team, which was pretty good. Neither of those pretty good teams were good enough to beat the Milwaukee Bucks, who are fantastic, which is what we've been saying on the show for a while. We both had this series picked to not be particularly competitive. So I'm not going to take a series that I expected the Bucks to win in 5, and then when they win in 5, point the finger at Kyrie and say it's your fault. No, it's the Boston Celtics' fault because they didn't put together a team that could compete with a team as good as Milwaukee. I don't care how well Kyrie Irving played. I think he could have averaged 35 points a game. They'd have still lost in 5 or 6. So all I haven't been said, he deserves his share of the blame. I don't think he deserves a lion's share of the blame. I think Brad Stevens and the young players' lack of adaptability was mostly the issue because Kyrie Irving for the better part of the year was efficient. He was a much better playmaker than he'd ever been before. He adapted his game. He improved his game. He wasn't perfect, but if the version of Kyrie that you got didn't make you happy, I don't know what Kyrie you had in your imagination, what Galaxy Opal Kyrie you thought you was gonna get, but you got a version of Kyrie that was better than the one that was in Cleveland in a lot of ways, and you weren't able to do anything with it. So I think it's best for him to part ways with Boston, particularly because I just don't think he works with Brad Stevens.
Yeah, I definitely think that Kyrie is the best player on the team, right? He's the best. He's the overall best, most talented player on the team. I mean, you can make an argument that Jason Tatum's more physically talented and it at some point will be better. But as it is right now, Kyrie's the best player. But the weird thing is that the Celtics were always better this year without him, from a record standpoint, from an efficiency standpoint, from an overall effectiveness standpoint. They were better. So that's the thing that's weird, right? That's the thing that's weird. And because of that, I don't know that any of the people that you named are really the fault, right? Because as you said, Kyrie came and Kyrie was a better version of everything. He was even better than what they bought.
Can I
Essentially.
comment on that real quick? I want you to finish your point. But
Okay.
you bring up a specific thing, and here's the thing: on paper, normally I would totally agree with you, but I actually watched a lot of these games where there was no Kyrie and games where there was Kyrie, and literally guys just ran harder. Like the young guys in particular, like Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Terry Rozier, you would see them play defense and then they play with Kyrie. I'm like, why aren't you playing the? He's not stopping you from doing your job. Like you could be doing your job better. It's not even about shots. And we both agreed on the show. Kyrie's not shooting too many shots for the level of skill that he has offensively. A player like that, you allow him 3, 4 bad shots a game, no problem, because he's gonna make some of those shots, his rhythm, whatever. But for the most part, he's too efficient to criticize his shot selection. He's just way too efficient, right? But when you look at those guys, I think their issues were causing them not to play hard as when they thought they were getting something in return for it. When they thought they were going to get a certain amount of shine, they would play harder. And that's not on Kyrie. He can't make them play harder. That's not his job. That's Brad Stevens' job. And he didn't do that job.
Well, for what I was getting at is um whether, no matter the reason, right, why they were better, because we can say, oh well, it looks like they were running harder, or it looks like they were playing harder, or it looks like they were more into it. I think there's a reason why that's the case. I think part of the reason why is because their way of winning, the way this team has always won, has been with a share the ball, spread the floor, whoever gets the open shot takes the shot. That's the way they've played. That's the way they've had success. Kyrie's style is different than that. I'm not saying it's a wrong or incorrect or he's not being efficient. None of that. It's just a different style. And as I mentioned before, there have been times where you play with a guy and you know, if you played on like an organized basketball team, you play with a guy who is good. I mean, he's good, and you and everybody on the team knows this dude's probably the best player on the team. But the way he plays literally takes other people out of the game. And it's just it's not even necessarily he's going to take everybody out of the game, but that particular group of players that you have with him now, it takes them out of the game. They don't rebound as well. They don't run the floor the same. They don't knock down as many open shots when they're playing with him. It's just the chemistry, the whole way the game, they function as a unit is not as seamless with him on the floor. I think that's what this is. I really think so. I don't think that it's necessarily anybody's fault. If you do want to point the finger at somebody, you can kind of point it at Danny Ainge, but I don't know that you can really criticize him for making the trade because it seemed like the right thing to do. Sometimes trades just don't work out. It doesn't mean that they were bad. It doesn't mean that they were stupid and somebody, miscalculated, personnel or talent. It doesn't mean any of that. Sometimes they just don't work. And I think that this is an example of a trade that seemed to make sense that just didn't work. And I don't think it's Kyrie's fault. I don't think it's Brad Stevens' fault. I don't even think it's the young players on Boston's fault. I don't think it's any of their fault. It just didn't work.
Well, and the reason I disagree with that is because not only, and I know when I bring up reports, you criticize that because reports aren't always true. Not only has it been the reports consistently throughout the year, but the Celtics themselves. Brad Stevens has said this, Kyrie Irving has said this, Marcus Morris has said this, Marcus Smart has said this, Terry Rozier has said this. Danny Ainge alluded to it. The young guys had agendas, and they weren't buying in the way they did last year because they had so much success that they weren't prepared to play their roles to the same level. And only when they thought they were going to get a chance to be all-stars did they want to play their roles. And I got to put that on you. And just from a schematic standpoint, again, when you see the Kyrie Irving, Al Horford pick and roll, it's like that's one of the hardest to defend pick and rolls in the league. Why am I only seeing it sometimes? I don't understand that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I just don't understand it. And again, from a personality standpoint, I really think that it's on the coach to hold guys accountable and say, you adapt or you get out of here. And that never happened in Boston. They just let those guys pout all year. And you'd hear it November. Yeah, looks like we have a little pouting. January. Looks like guys are pouting. They go on a streak. They go on a bad streak. Looks like guys are pouting again. Coming out of Boston all year. And what's Brad Stevens saying during that time? Nothing. He's just being a good old coach. No, I put that on you. That's what being an NBA coach is about. You see, you hear all the time about like guys like Phil Jackson, Mark Jackson, Popovich as well. Not just the X's and O's guys. He's good with personalities. He knows how to be a leader of men. He knows how to manage personalities because, particularly in the NBA, when every player gets so much time on camera with the basketball in their hands, playing time, 5 people on the court, everybody is 20% of the effect of what's going on the court at a minimum, basically, if everybody's equal, possibly more if you're dominant. You have to be able to manage egos. And I can't find any argument or evidence that Brad Stevens has any ability to do that or even attempted it.
Well, for me, I would agree that Brad Stevens is definitely what I call a Hoiberg personality type. He is. I believe Fred Hoiberg has a brilliant mind for basketball. I don't think he didn't get an opportunity to get to it because the personalities on his team were too strong and they overtook him. And so you never found out on a professional level. And I don't think that's a switch he even has to be able to flip. And I think Brad Stevens is in the same category. When I talk about reports, what I talk about with the reports is those that are based on according to sources. This person said this. Now, if there's somebody, a principal involved, standing there literally speaking or giving a quote, then that's different because the person is sitting here saying it in front of you. But these reports that say according to sources, blah, 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 all of those types of things, especially the ones that people love to jump on, not saying you, but fans love to jump on this, is when you hear someone say, well, the Bulls are interested in so and so and so and so. And they got that from someone put out a report or someone tweeted, the Bulls have interest in so and in whatever player. And so many people take those types of quotes, whether it's not even just about being interested in a player. Someone says, well, according to sources, Celtics younger players have their own agenda. Jaylen Brown wants to do this. Jaylen Brown wants to do that. That none of that is really confirmed. And so often those things are wrong. So like the ideal way to handle and to process that information is to hear it, understand that it's been said, observe, and then watch to see if someone who's a principal involved in the situation either confirms or denies it. Because that stuff, dude, if I could tell you how many times I've been in a virtual chat or in a room with several different publications where I've seen how the strongest verbiage you can find is literally generated for a headline, and how people take it and run down the street with it.
But listen,
it really,
I've made this argument
it's
before.
amazing. It's amazing.
I totally trust
that's
you
what I'm saying
on that, and I agree with that. But usually when I bring up reports, I'm looking at stuff that has evidence that you can see, that you can also corroborate with multiple sources and reports from different areas. Because I'm not even always talking about media people reporting. Sometimes a teammate has said this, or a coach has said that, or a former player has said this. And then, and when I'll say reports, I'm talking about there's a lot of evidence for this. And if we want to go down the line and say whether it's true or not true, we can do that. But I'm not just going to dismiss it because the hardest of hard evidence isn't there. It's there's some evidence for this and reports about it. Believe it, don't believe it, but that's on the table. Not that's on the table and completely confirms this 100% without a doubt. And I think you can include a level of what could be considered hearsay, what could be considered valid. There's a big gray area there because people don't want to risk their reputation giving out information, and reporters can't confirm their sources a lot of cases specifically. They can't say the GM of the such and such said this, right? So, and it's a case by case basis. But I don't want to get too off track with the Kyrie Irving thing. I think Kyrie Irving is a moody, iffy teammate in certain ways, and you need something around that to police that. Whether it's and I think ideally, if he went to a place like the Miami Heat, that's great. because they're gonna let him pout a little bit and then knock it off when it's time to knock it off. Because Spoelstra and Riley and Dwayne Wade up wherever he's doing in the front office, they're not gonna have that. They have a culture, you know. Popovich, they have a culture, and you have to respect that culture. There's a few other places in the league where I think he can fit in, like Doc Rivers, LA Clippers. That'd be perfect for Kyrie because he'd go there. Great coach for him. They're gonna try and get the most out of him. But if he starts pouting, 2 days, knock it off. This is about the team. This ain't about you. I don't care about your flat earth. You got a job to do, and that job involves you communicating. You ain't running hard enough on defense, right?
Right.
And there's accountability there. I think, and this is what I don't like about Ty Lue. I don't think Ty Lue was always eager to hold Kyrie accountable. Maybe because he had his hands full with LeBron. Maybe it's his ulcers being caused by clutch sports. I don't know. But he let Kyrie get away with too much. Brad Stevens let Kyrie get away with too much. I don't think that's the main root of this. I think that's a struggle you're always going to have whenever you coach Kyrie Irving. One of the reasons that I'm not like, oh, Kyrie to the Knicks, yay. Like, you know, do I want to?
Yeah, no, I'd agree. I understand.
Yeah, if he play making point guard that doesn't play a whole lot of defense, is semi-injury prone and is moody, not particularly. That's not particularly the team I want to root for.
Yeah, no.
If you talk about the Brooklyn Nets, people's talking about Kyrie to Brooklyn. I'm like,
why?
Exactly. Are you seriously talking about giving up a 23-year-old D'Angelo Russell, 6'5", on the rise, took that team further than they should go, basically not playing with a center, versus Kyrie Irving won a few more games with the Boston Celtics?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly believe that by this time next year, there may not be a gap if much at all between D'Angelo Russell and Kyrie Irving. To be honest, there may not be. I mean, because D'Angelo's bigger, and that right there in itself is a big deal when the skill level is somewhat comparable. So, yeah, I definitely I don't know if he'll be the shooter that Kyrie is that quickly.
Well, it's really that Kyrie is such a remarkable finisher, post-up. He's just a great scorer
He's
all
just
around.
a great scorer.
Shooting wise, I actually think they like if you look at D'Angelo Russell, he looks like he will be a great shooter
Yeah,
in his prime.
he
Because
will. But
he
I
has
think
moments where he's a
Kyrie.
great shooter.
Yeah,
From a shooting standpoint, but there's shooting happens all over the court, right?
yeah,
So you're also talking about floaters and
yes,
layups, and and everything, and like step backs and all this other stuff. The main thing is, will that gap be worth it? Because D'Angelo Russell is not in that MVP conversation where Kyrie Irving sneaks into it when he's playing well. So when you have D'Angelo, it's understood we should have more money to spend on other people. When you have Kyrie Irving, he might make the same amount of money as Kawhi Leonard. And I don't want to pay people Kawhi Leonard money if they're not giving me Kawhi Leonard benefits.
yeah. No, I totally. I would if I'm the Knicks. I mean, the Bulls need a point guard, but if the Bulls got Kyrie, I'd be like, oh, that's good. That would be
Cool.
that would be my reaction. And I'm gonna watch and I'm gonna root for him because he's wearing
Right.
my team's colors. But it's not what I'm not. If you will see a much better reaction out of me if the Bulls get the second pick overall and draft Ja Morant.
Ja Morant, yeah. So yeah, if the Knicks do get Kyrie and KD, obviously, I'm rooting for the Knicks now when they got Frank Ntilikina and Kevin Knox. So obviously, I'm gonna root for them then. But are those the two players that I want the most in free agency? Absolutely not. I'd be much happier if we got Kawhi Leonard and Klay Thompson.